Journalist suing the network was collaborating with an Egyptian security agent while he was working for Al Jazeera in Cairo. Former Al Jazeera cameraman Mohammed Fawzi was one of the group of journalists detained in Egypt in 2013 on charges of stoking unrest and publishing false news. And this was during the time of the coup against the country's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi. The Anadolu news agency says hacked emails reveal that Fawzi gave the security services details about Al Jazeera's operations, and in turn, they helped secure Fawzi's later release. Fawzi is bringing legal proceedings against the network for neglect and endangering the lives of journalists working in Egypt. Al Jazeera denies these claims. Let's speak to Dalia Fahmy. She is the Assistant Professor of Political Science at Long Island University and Senior Fellow at the Center for Global Policy. She joins me now from New Brunswick. Dalia, always good to have you in Al Jazeera. So this report indicates that Fawzi was informing Egyptian security agents about Al Jazeera's movements at the time of the Morsi coup. But what does it tell you?
It tells us that the media continue to be the battleground between regimes and their populace and regimes and one another. For Fawzi to be working in an independent news agency and providing information to the state is pretty telling. And for states like Egypt to continue to use journalists as political pawns, as we saw with the Al Jazeera 3 in 2014-2015, that these are political pawns and a part of a project. When we think about what the healthy media is all about, they play a crucial role not just in shaping democracy, but also in exposing loopholes in states and regimes. And for this to be co-opted by the state or infiltrated by the state really undermines that mechanism that aims to protect and strengthen democracy.
Now, when this uprising took place in Egypt, let's just take us back a few steps. How was state security in Egypt dealing with journalists back then?
Well, if we remember, the work of Al Jazeera, especially during the initial revolution, was groundbreaking in that it was exposing an independent lens of what was happening. Since then, we have seen an attack on journalists. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, there are currently dozens of international journalists being held in Egyptian prisons. Citizen journalists are regularly rounded up. Today, if we remember, just last month, the Egyptian government shut down 64 news websites. And an individual who was working with the making of an Al Jazeera documentary was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Just last summer, we saw journalists gather in front of the journalist syndicate asking for not just greater press freedoms, but for the release of journalists that are being held in Egyptian prisons. And these protests continue. And so what we're seeing is, again, it is the medium of media that has become the battleground for regimes against their own populations and regimes and against one another, as we're seeing with the allegations or the attempt to use Al Jazeera as a pawn by Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Bahrain at this moment with the Egyptian government.
All right, Dalia Fahmy, thank you so much for your perspective on that. We appreciate it. Thank you. The former Brazilian